can't add anything in now. Oh, no, that's fine. But how can we look at today differently? How can we look at these emotions that we're getting and stop creating them? And how can we stop those behaviors that are habitually there, but habitually hurting you as well?
Yeah.
And then that's about how do I make today better regardless of the situation.
Lend me your ears. This nation will rise up.
Welcome to the Elemental Health Podcast. Welcome back to the Elemental Health Podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in this week. It's the first episode of 2020. Hopefully you're listening to them in order. Otherwise, the evergreen concept is out the window. But welcome back. The first year of launching this project was incredible for me, and I had some incredible conversations, and it really took me on a windy path to understand more about how I conceived and perceived health. And that changed and transformed from the conversations in this podcast. So hopefully that value is being transferred across when you guys are listening to the podcast. That is my deep desire. And the feedback's been fantastic. So, I'm really hoping that you guys are going to get more and more value as we move through this year as well. And I got lots and lots of exciting guests lined up for you. No less so than this very first guest of the year, a gentleman called Ed Ley. And he started off in elite sports in the UK, a really diverse coaching background, opened his own business and was transforming lives over here in the UK, and then decided to up sticks and now lives with his family in Denmark, and has really cultivated and created incredible, what I'd call leadership coaching concept that he's transferred despite not speaking the language and despite all the nuances of a different country, and created a really full coaching practice for some high-powered, high-level leaders that he works with, and the concepts that he goes through and we talk about on the podcast are really not just applicable to high-level leaders, but I think that shows that the quality and the caliber of the work that he's doing. But in more detail, he's trying to understand and really build out something that's deep in my heart as well, which is that we have to be holistic in our approach to health, and we have to think about how the brain works, how the neuroscience works behind it all, our emotions, how our consciousness fits together with how our muscles move, how our body moves, and how our digestive system works. We are one unit, and we really need to think about that holistic model, that holistic approach, transferring into every aspect of our life. And that's really my understanding of where Ed is at and the level he is at, and I'm truly impressed by his work. So hopefully you will also be, and hopefully you will also enjoy the conversation that we have and the details that we go into. No further ado, guys, please welcome the awesome Ed Ley. Ed Ley, welcome to the Elemental Health Podcast. Thank you very much for jumping on with me. The audience has heard a little bit about you in the intro that I've preloaded for them, but we're gonna go dive into your backstory and kind of how you ended up in Denmark and in the coaching space, and really sort of dive into the way you do things and your view of the world and the stuff that you're up to, which is really, really exciting. Start with saying thank you for jumping on, and maybe you can kind of bring us up to speed on your journey through fitness and coaching to kind of where you are now and what you do now and why that's important to you.
Well, firstly, thanks so much for having me. I guess I'll start relatively near the beginning. If you want to go back further, then you can ask questions in that direction. So in 2004, I did a degree in sports conditioning, coaching and rehabilitation. And I met a guy in the pub, and he was kind of telling me about how he'd created this course. He was a physiotherapist alongside another physiotherapist. And what this degree was all about was going into professional sports environments, and rather than them having a rehabber, a masser, a nutritionist, a psychologist, a trainer, a go-between coach that might tell everyone about it, somebody kind of documenting all of this and collating all of that information. That might happen at Manchester United with like 5 people doing each thing in a really succinct, powerful system. But then you just go down, even halfway down that league at the time, there'd be so little money that they'd have one person employed for each one who didn't have a full-time job and perhaps wasn't a fantastic person in that industry. So the idea was, let's create this individual that can do all of that stuff and work just underneath a doctor, physiotherapist, and do loads of stuff. That sounded really great in my brain when I applied for it. In practice, it wasn't fantastic. Sorry, Yui. It wasn't great. But what it did do was kind of allow me to take this step back and go, oh, actually, these things have got crossovers. These things have got ties together, and there's a lot of power in being able to do okay all of these things. So I walked away from university and I was like, right, so I'm going to get a job being this in a professional sports environment. And the professional sports environment said, no, you're not. And so basically asking why not, they said, well, we want 5 years experience in each of these areas. You know, the theory is great, but unless you've got 25 years experience of having done all of these things, then we don't think you're going to be good enough at any one of them. If you want to zero in on one, then maybe we can talk. But I still like the principle of it. So what I did was kind of ask these lower league or lower budget like professional rugby teams what they were actually doing to be able to serve their players at a higher level without investing a lot. But what they were doing was going into the community and finding the best osteopath, chiropractor, physiotherapist, trainer, nutritionist, psychologist. They were just finding the best in the city and saying, hey, do you want to put that you are Bath Rugby or Bristol Rugby's or Bristol Rovers physio on your website? And what we'll do is we'll give you 1 day a week. You'll come in and we won't pay you a fortune, but you'll get to do something different from your general practice. And these guys will probably come over to you and pay you in their own time as well. And so it will boost your business. It will help us. Great system. And I thought, that's a fantastic idea. So I did the same. And I just sought out all of the best in the industry, in the area. And I mean, this is what, 20 years ago, right? So I just wrote letters, not quite 20, 16, 15 years ago, I wrote letters to all of these places and spent loads of time on the phone and dropped into places. And eventually I got a full day's work in 7 days a week in 7 different locations, working with all of these people I worked with Chelsea physio, a Bath rugby osteopath, the South Gloucestershire cricket trainer. I worked with a psychiatrist, a psychologist. I worked in a doctor's surgery, just loads and loads and loads and loads of different places, and kind of really, really built up my experience. And I worked in one place that was over the road from accountancies like Deloitte and all the big law firms. This was in Bristol, and all of these guys were coming over and looking for help to get fit or treat an injury or lose weight or have less stress in their lives in general, right? And I was finding that they were 2 different types of person. And one of them was, I'm doing everything that I know I should do. And that one person, I would take them in and go, okay, what stuff are you doing? And they would go, oh, I'm doing all of this. I'm doing this running and doing a little bit of, and you could kind of generally apply it to the relative trends that were going on. So 15 years ago was CV, and 10 years ago they were like, I'm doing all of this HIIT training, and I'm on this diet, so I'm eating 10 bags of pasta a day with tuna, and it would just like it'd be on Vogue, right? But they'd be doing what the mainstream was saying. Nothing radical, but largely what the mainstream was saying. So it would flip between high carbohydrate or high protein or high fat or whatever. And it would be the same sort of exercise that people were most talking about at the time. Those people that were doing everything they thought was right, if I just tweaked stuff, they would get the result. And those people would form those before and after pictures, right? Because they'd come in looking tired and weary and low energy. And within 6 to 8 weeks, they'd be like, you got abs. And, generally it was like springtime that brought them in. So they'd have a bit of a tan as well. And they had the budget to see you a few times a week, and it was quiet in the summer as well, right? So they'd look great. And then the other 9 people weren't doing all of the things that they knew that they should be doing. So then the problem that the whole industry, in particular like the personal training industry, had identified was these people don't know what to do. And true enough, that nobody knows the perfect system, and everybody can have something added to what they're doing that can really, really help. But if somebody's doing everything that they know how to do and you give them more, then they're, as far as I could tell, they're kind of they were mentally in the right place they needed to be. And that made me look good when they started doing the stuff. But then 9 out of 10 were doing nothing. And they were going, I should eat like this, but I'm eating like this. I should move like this, but I'm moving like this. So they weren't even doing the stuff they knew how to do. So it wasn't an information problem. It was I can't get myself to consistently do what I need to be doing. So I was like, okay, how do we put that into a nutshell? And they were like, well, I lack the willpower to do it on my own. So what do you want me for? I want you to tell me what, make me do it, basically. Mm-hmm. And then I go, okay, so what type of character are you looking for? Are you looking for and then I was a personality trainer. And I think that spreads the personal training industry quite a bit. You've got I get on really well with this guy, and we seem to have similar friends and similar ideas about the world. So I'm willing to spend 3 hours a week with him, right? Yeah. And then you've got I'm looking to hire dad. So you get the person that goes, get back to it, pull your socks up, what you playing at. And then some other people say, I'm looking to hire mum. And so it always came back to, I'm looking to hire mum, mate, or dad. Not, if people are really honest, what they want is, I just want this result. I want to be the person who does the stuff that they need to do, but I've decided that I'm not. So I'm going to shell out all of this money effectively forever until my life changes, in order to get these results. And that was a pivoting point that started my journey towards looking at not what to do, but why they're not consistently doing
the behavioral piece, really.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Loads to unpick there, but I want you to sort of continue on to kind of, I really want to get to where you are now, in terms of your coaching and what you're up to at the moment. Just reflecting back on your education and your initial journey, what gave you the kind of the impetus and the focus to come up with the idea to go around the different disciplines? Because I would think, correct me if I'm wrong, probably you were early 20s, and looking for a bit of a laugh in life, and that sounds like quite a forward-thinking step.
Yeah, I want to be careful not to create the impression that it was forward thinking in any way. If I were to go way back into my childhood, I'd probably come back and say that willpower was likely one of the things that I did not possess in any way at all. And but if somebody told me I couldn't do something, then I would go and do that. And I think that I just stumbled upon an idea that was, if I'm going to actually build a career out of the education that I've just had, I need to find places to work, and I can work in all of these different fields as an intern or whatever they give me. I can do massage and I know how to do it. And, you know, my degree course was significantly longer than most massage qualifications. And my training qualification was significantly longer than most personal training qualifications. And the same for each of those, what are hands-on vocational skills. And I'd done a lot of hands-on at university, and I just needed to do more hands-on. And as far as I could tell, there weren't jobs, and I've never really been a job person. I've always, I don't know, from about 12 years old, I've always made my own money with just kind of fun projects. I ran a football coaching school. I did car washing, all sorts of kind of fun things to make some money. So I've always been proactive at going, okay, so how do I make the money most quickly out of the skills that I have? And I think that's probably what led to it, rather than this huge insight of any kind.
Cool. So let's fast forward to now. You're still coaching, but in a completely different sphere, and presumably you've developed your skills and your skill set to enable you to do that. So what are you up to at the moment? I guess for the easiest question.
Okay, well, the gym that I started working in, that I mentioned, that had the kind of the Chelsea physio, the Bath physio, an osteopath, the professional athlete coach, etc. I worked in there for 1.5 days a week for about 3 years, and then there are a few other interim bits that would be far too long to tell you, but ultimately I ended up taking over this place. So I took over that place, and at the same time I'd really started digging deep, hiring people to teach me about the brain and how it works, and how people overcome these things, these sticking points, like feeling like you need willpower to do certain things, and feeling like you have to circumnavigate your way around your weaknesses, like, oh, I'm a shy person, or whatever. I was really, really digging into all of that stuff. And what I got to in the UK was basically using neuroscience principles to overarch both the physical and the mental. But I owned a gym, so it was very much lent towards mental. And probably had about 5 or 6 personal trainers working at any one time, using these sort of neuroscience principles to help build habits and get better physical results as well, with less input, just by creating a better mind-body connection, so that people kind of could listen to the signals inside their body and pay attention to those and respond to them more quickly, rather than I'm just going to follow this prescription rote and then see what happens, but never improve that connection with the body. I mean, I think that people that are more naturally healthy eat when they're hungry and recognize that hunger, and sleep when they're tired and recognize that tiredness, and move when their brain says, I think we need to move. And the people who are less fit, healthy, store more body fat, etc., have just lost that connection. So they don't recognize the agitation with the need to move, and they don't recognize that sluggishness with the need to go to bed, and they don't recognize that hunger for a particular way of eating as a signal to go and get that food that they need. And the more people recognize those feelings, the more they get in tune with them, the more they start responding to them as commands, just like when we were born, right? But it was a more physical dominant sort of program. And then I moved to Copenhagen. I sold everything up, moved to Copenhagen, and decided when I got here that I wanted to do a whole load of things very, very differently. And in amongst that, I took a year off. So I didn't, I kept a few clients in the UK, and I didn't work for a year, and I just started experimenting on myself and adding in the stuff that made me most healthy and most happy and most energized and most productive. And my kind of coaching developed out of the fact that I was able to very much overcome a lot of the struggles that I was going on just by asking myself the right questions and doing the right things and taking the right actions in a way that made making habits out of what I was doing easier, rather than this pray and spray. I'm going to have some of this and some of this and some of this and some of this, and overwhelming myself. Rather, just getting kind of really more present with not just the somaticness of it, oh, my stomach is saying this when I eat this, and it's saying this when I eat that. Perhaps I shouldn't eat this and I should eat that, right? That was the body connection. But the other one going, oh, why is it that I feel like that? Just starting to get really curious with the way I reacted in situations and the way I thought about things, and kind of saying, oh, well, I don't know why I feel like this, but I'm going to try doing this around that and seeing if it becomes a habit, and getting present with that feedback from my brain and getting present with that feedback from my body just really helped me build out a system that worked for me, but one that I could more easily apply to clients. And then I just started contacting CEOs and C-suite people and founders in Copenhagen, saying, hey, I'm doing, I was a health coach in the UK, just sold up, moved here, I'm looking to build my network. And I just started meeting people every day and finding these people that are just crazy busy, really overwhelmed, waking up or staying up till 3 a.m. to finish stuff, and then doing the kind of the good dad bit and being awake early in the morning to look after the kids, and just finding themselves pulled in all sorts of directions, and knowing that actually if I layer in a ton of exercise into what this person is already doing, it's just not going to work. They're just going to escape from me. And if I layer in, all right, what I want you to do, have you got Tupperware? I'm going to need you to start cooking and Tupperwaring up your food, and just and then saying, well, if you want it enough, you'll make the time. It just doesn't work. It's just a daft model. It's just the seller trying to make excuses for themselves, I think, rather than trying to help the person in front of them. So we started trying to just coaching people to just slow down those emotions that are overcoming them, and look at them and see what ingredients are creating them, and then stop including those ingredients in their shopping budget. Like, same thing with food. And then people started to create this space for exercise and create this space for all that stuff. So I've kind of got this physical and mental performance model that I'm using at the moment.
Cool. And do you get resistance from that audience around their kind of busy schedule and not wanting to kind of slow down, or not being, quote unquote, not being able to slow down? How do you sort of deal with those challenges when you meet someone that's super, super busy? The reason I ask, I mean, selfishly, I've coached guys as well that, director of 3 companies, going for tenders, blah, blah, blah. And just getting hold of those people and having those conversations is a challenge. And then to unpick what's going on in their head. I'm just curious as to what resistance you come up against and how you kind of push through that and make those changes happen.
Well, first and foremost, it starts off with a commitment. And one of the commitments that we ask people to make when they start coaching is a financial one. And a slightly uncomfortable financial one, right? It can't just be I'll add that into my shopping cart and carry on. So they've created that first agreement with their brain that they are willing to hand over something of value for a result. And that's because we want to make a living for it and we're going to hand over their time. But ultimately, they're investing as a commitment to themselves, that they want things to be different, that they're acknowledging that it isn't where they want it to be. And that's just, I don't just stop at that commitment. So they have to commit to the time, and they have to commit to the homework, and they have to, openly say and write down, I am willing to commit, I'm willing to do these things, I'm willing to face these challenges. And I ask people to state that is the commitment that they'll make. And I don't promise any form of accountability. I just say, hey, John, do you remember at the start where you promised yourself, where you committed to do those things? I'm just pointing out, I don't mind what you do with it, because I'm not in this for your result. I'm in this because we made this agreement, and I'm going to do what I committed to do. At the moment, you're not doing what you committed to do. How do you feel about that? And I'm not there. I'm not an accountability buddy. I'm not mum. I'm not dad. And I'm not mate. I'm just the guy that you hired to remind you when you slip up on the things that you said you'd do.
Cool. And what's the aspect of that relationship that you really value and you're able to develop your career around?
Sorry, could you reframe the question? How do you mean?
So obviously you've come through a kind of fitness, physical background into, and then you've explored the neuroscience aspect of it, and now you're dealing with obviously senior leaders within the sort of Copenhagen community. What do you value within that coaching framework? What do you benefit from that? How do you see yourself growing from those interactions?
Well, good question. I started by accident, finding myself working with partners, and just in the big accountancies, law firms, and CEOs. And what I would find is that I would get some senior lawyers come into the studio and talk to me about training and working with me. And the most stressed ones always had the most stressed boss. Always. Mm-hmm. And what I started to recognize in the stories that they were telling about how they were looking at the expectations that were on them and how it was framed and all sorts of things like that, was that the more stressed the copy guy and the people doing just the lowest skill stuff at the bottom, let's say, the more stress there was at the top. And I started to recognize that there was this massive trickle-down effect. And I could create this really low budget service that served the people at the bottom a little bit because of the amount of them that I needed and the amount of me that there actually is. Or I could get really, really, really good at helping the guy or girl or woman at the top and know that I'd be impacting all of the people below. And so it was a case of, am I the type of person that wants to be the CEO of a large company that serves millions or thousands, or a small one that serves a few really deeply? And I realized that I prefer the conversations. I love the conversations and the light bulb moments that you see and the transformational stories that you see, but also the relationships that they talk about, they're improving with them and the people that they interact with most, and then them and the people that they interact with most. And I just see this huge trickle down effect. So then I go, okay, so the CEO has got X thousand pounds to invest. Where's he best off investing it? And it comes back to himself and his own clarity, direction, focus, and strategy. And the deeper that he can go into that, she can go into that, the better he serves the people that, and she serves, God, this sexism is a nightmare, that work below him. And just felt like a natural thing to come and work with them over here as well.
Brilliant. And I love it. Absolutely love it. I think I'm kindred spirits in that sense of not wanting a workforce where you've got lots of employees and you're serving thousands of people. It's more about the one-on-one interaction, even down to my friendship circle. I'd much rather a one-on-one conversation than a big party, for sure. It's I think you naturally got a bias one way or the other. That's
Sure.
really interesting. And I think, impact those leaders and that trickle down effect will work really well. That's nice, really, really nicely put. Cool. So, and your motivation, because I read a couple of your blog posts, your motivations for kind of upping sticks and moving to Denmark were quite interesting to me as well. So can you kind of give us the aha moment or the trigger point to you wanting a kind of different life and different landscape?
Yeah, a major catalyst was that my father-in-law was really sick, and he'd had cancer for 3 years. But we were over visiting, and we're on the beach with the family. And this was the first time that we'd seen him in that 3 years where it kind of felt like cancer had him rather than he had cancer. And, he was in a wheelchair and other things were starting to go wrong. Right? He had an arch on his foot drop, kind of quite rapidly, which meant a wheelchair was needed, and breathing was no longer, independently working, so he had a gas thing on. And we're on the beach, and the beach that we live by now, and the kids were having great fun just kind of messing around with their grandparents. And I kind of had this penny drop moment where, like, half an hour before I'd been on the phone trying to solve an admin problem, and in the morning I'd been on my phone trying to solve a rental problem. And I kind of realized that what I was doing in my company in the UK was I was spending 22 hours a week doing one-to-one stuff, and I was spending 40 hours a week looking after a building and looking after staff. And I just kind of, in that moment, I was just like, that is absolutely not what I want to be doing with my time at all. So I turned to my wife and said, hey, do you fancy moving here? And she said, yeah, all right. And then we turned to my wife's parents and said, hey, we're moving to Copenhagen. Is that all right? And the girls got really excited, and Christina's parents were like, hey, you're not going to do that. And we're like, no, we are. And then we got on the plane, and we're driving back from Heathrow, and the phone rings, and it's my wife's parents, and they say, so it takes about 1.5 years, and they're trying to call our bluff here, right? And it takes about 1.5 years to get a flat in Copenhagen. And so you need to get on the lists, and if you know people, they'll let you jump lists as well. And so you're really going to need to get on the list early. So do you want us to put your name on a list? Because it could be 1.5 years. And we're like, yeah, put our name on a list. We're looking at 1.5 years here now. And then we got home, and we're like, okay, so we're setting this plan for 1.5 years. What needs to happen? We just started listing everything that we needed to do, and conversations we needed to have, and conversations we needed to hold off, and people that we need to not tell in order for us to be able to sell a business that had any value at all, and keep our staff safe, ironically, and keep them in a job. The only way to do that was for them not to know and not to kind of bolt, and us to have a thing of value to pass on. We just had no idea how any of that would work. And then the next day we got a call from Christine's parents saying, hey, so you're at the top of the list. 3 people in front of you said no. If you don't take this flat now, it could be 2 years before you get one, because they'll put you to the bottom of the list and say they said no once before. should we take it for you? And I'm like, what's that now? And Christina's dad goes, look, I want to make sure that this happens because it would be really important to me to know that my daughter and grandchildren are kind of coming home, as it were. So I would be willing to pay for it, and then you just pay me back. I was like, this is mental. So we said yes. And we're like, okay, so now we've got this financial timeline. So how quickly could we do this? So we started calling around, and we put our house on the market, and it took a tedious 14 days to sell, which for somehow, I really don't know how, but time slowed down to the degree that if somebody said it's only been 14 days, I'd have been like, no, it's been at least 6 months. But it just went rapidly. Sold the house within 14 days. The business was a total ball ache, and we really don't want to go into that here. But it was a right pain in the ass, and there were a lot of scammers out there trying to steal your business as soon as you put it up for sale. But 100 days later, we left. So from decision on the beach to 100 days later, we arrived in Copenhagen, which was, it was all a bit of a blur, a little bit of a whirlwind.
And any reflections on that, looking back now to those decisions and decisions to sort of that you weren't kind of, I guess, living your purpose, and you wanted to make a massive change?
I don't think it came from we wanted to make a massive change. The truth is that we were really happy in Bristol, and we were really enjoying what we were doing. We loved the place and loved, our friends and the company and the people that worked for us, and we really, really enjoyed that. And what I could have taken from it was, right, I've decided that I don't want to do all of that admin, so the next person I employ logically needs to be someone who's going to run the place, someone who's going to be a manager, not a personal trainer. And that would be the logical next step. And if I'm honest, it probably would have been far easier and far less emotionally draining than moving. But it just kind of, it felt like an adventure, and it was kind of like one of those memento moments where you go, oh, well, here we could live by the beach, and we could live by the forests, and our girls would not be pushed into education ridiculously early, and they could play in school, and we wouldn't have to move our mother-in-law to us, and I could actually start something again inside a building that didn't have the same number of issues as the building that we were in before. And it was just all of those kind of things came together. And the truth is, if we didn't decide to move to Copenhagen, we'd probably gone home and gone, do you know what, should we sell the business and start something that's more aligned with where we want to be now. It was just that I say ridiculous things sometimes.
Awesome. Right, switching gears. I love it. I love that story. It's brilliant. And brave and courageous at the same time, and just going for it. I think a lot of people sort of hold back. Obviously, you had some motivation there around your family, but I think there's so many people out there kind of just going through the motion because that's what they think they should be doing, and not really taking life by the balls. It sounds like you've always lived quite a great life. So just acknowledge you for that, Ed. I just wanted to switch gears a bit. So I know you've given one TED talk in Bristol, Tedx talk, and you've got another one coming up. So your original TEDx that I did listen to probably quite a while ago now, I think when I first come across your content, what was that about, and what was your feedback from going through that process of giving a TEDx?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep, sorry.
So we had a momentary screen freeze there. You know what, this is going to touch on my next one, right? But when I was researching the brain and, you know, why people don't consistently do what they said they do, almost to pick up from the first story, I stumbled across a man named Michael Perez. And he is a genius. He's like the Rain Man of the NLP world. He's known as the encyclopedia. He'd probably prefer that to the Rain Man definition, actually, having said that. He's like an encyclopedia of just how all of that kind of works in the NLP world. And I hired him as a coach. And what I kind of had going in was that I'd been told my entire school life that I wasn't very academic, and that I was kind of like a C grade person, and I was going to get a C or less in pretty much every subject in my life. Just, you know, you probably went to school at similar time to me, and you know how they rank and grade people, and it was difficult to change that rank or grade. And also I was told very early on that I was shy, and I was also a smoker and a heavy drinker at that time. And I'd just taken on this new business, and I'd just had a baby, and I just had a whole load of new stuff, and you know, it just become real. I didn't have to just provide for myself and pay the bills. It was, now I've got a child and a company and staff and all of those kind of things to deal with. But I kind of thought that I had was, if all of these A grade people have got trouble with willpower in this area, and I always told, oh, it's because you lack willpower that you've got all of these problems, maybe that wasn't true. So I hired a coach to go, look, I've been reading around all of these things, but I haven't got to a point where I'm able to implement them on other people to the depth that I want to be able to. And I'd love to see how it works. And within 6 months, I'd done a TED Talk, I'd written a book. So TED Talk was the I'm not shy anymore, and written a book was, and I wrote every single day. I read a research paper and then wrote an article on it every single day, and posted it on LinkedIn, sent it out in an email, put it on a blog. Doubled the size of my business, didn't touch a cigarette again, didn't smoke again. And I was like, okay, so this stuff works. And why is it that this stuff works? And then just my TED Talk was around the idea that we're kind of faced with these facts that we built around the idea of gluttony and sloth, and you're greedy and you're lazy. That's why you're overweight and unfit. When actually, when you really look into it, it tends to be that we've been told that we need to find that we just need to suck it up and do it for exercise. And the people that are fit are the ones that suck it up and do it. And the people that eat the right way are the people with the most willpower. Well, and actually, if you just start from, I'm going to create this beautiful plate and really, really get present and enjoy this amazing food, and I'm going to create this 5-star experience for myself and treat myself that way, like I deserve that. And then I'm going to play physically, whatever that actually means to me, I'm going to start moving in the direction that I want to. And rather than getting overwhelmed by looking to the future, I'm just going to focus on the present and making today more beautiful and today more fun in the areas of not just food and exercise, but in every area. We just tend to start moving towards where we want to be, and we start getting more creative and more curious around what we can get our body to do next and what we can create in the kitchen next, and get more connected with ourselves. And this crosses over to mammals as well. And I touched on this in the TED Talk, where you looked at the early zoos. They were just these concrete cages where they would chuck in any food into the monkeys, and the monkeys died early, and they got depressed, and they gained weight. And when they started recreating the natural environment of monkeys, and started feeding them what they actually ate in the wild, the monkeys just naturally started playing. And a bit more of that type of approach. What would make this more fun, basically, is the approach that we need to start moving the whole industry towards, because we need to just let go of the fact, this idea that I've got all of this knowledge, you've got none of this knowledge, and that's the reason that I'm healthy and you're not. Because let's face it, 95% of personal trainers came from, I've always been fit and healthy. So they lose that mental connection between it. They just naturally assume, I'm good, you're not, and I need to teach you what I know so that you can be good.
Yeah, there's no developmental process there, is there? And I think that's one of my gripes within the industry, really, is this kind of not just industry, society as a whole. I think there's this emphasis on knowledge and information, and there's no cultivation of anything else, and it's overly. It's just everyone's just got a massive bias to that next bit of information versus just kind of sitting and pondering and finding their own path through.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, awesome story. And that sort of, it definitely rings true with everything that I'm doing with my practice as well, is trying to align people with what's going to work for them and not teaching them as such, allowing them to develop on their own and find their own path to health, really. I think everyone's on their own journey. Absolutely.
And I think the phrase that I've used, that I think came from Dax Moy, was more extraction, less instruction. So just kind of pulling out from people where they are and where they want to be, and what the logical next step for them is, what's the best next thing.
Yeah, and it aligns. I mean, you've got kids. I've got a very, very young son now. It aligns with the developmental process of a child that is hemmed in by the education system, in my opinion. And you start to hear about people unlearning their children as well, and how they develop on their own naturally in a natural environment. And it's fascinating to me because we're all big kids, right? It's not like there's no differentiation in my mind to how that happens and how this happens. It really doesn't. So yeah, I think we can all just find our own way and intrinsic kind of awareness, if we're able to tap into it, which I think was a very early point that you made.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my seeing the contrasts between the Danish education and the English education system, and I won't claim in any way that that either of them are perfect, but my oldest daughter had a lot of information pushed into her during her first 2 years of school. And that pushing in of information did not make her a desperate learner. And Sophia, my youngest, she's just been at what's called Burnhau over here, but is kind of nursery, with a little bit of structure to it in different age groups. But it's fundamentally play. Up until the age of 6, and she's so curious and wants to learn so much, and rather than push, she's kind of pulling to, hey, give me that book, tell me what that says, teach me that thing, I want more, I want more, I want more. And I just feel like it's the like pushing a child to do something, or holding them back for doing something until they pull so hard that they kind of sprint off in that direction. And it's a small experiment, right? And it's an N of 1, right? With the contrast between the two. But it's something that seems really clear to me and really powerful, that it's been a result of the difference in education system. One being, let's push this information in, and one being, hey, let's see how this one likes to take their information in. And by letting them play, and then see how they play with these things. And chances are that as we already know, humans are smart. We just layering that smart on top of reading and writing and arithmetic, all of those things, that needs to happen. But how do we get that information in the fastest in a way that it makes sense to them? And generally, it's if they're in charge of it, I think it works a lot better. And it's the same with adults. People
Absolutely.
work better if they're in charge with the next direction. It's all neuroassociation, as we call it. If the last story can connect to this story, can connect to this story, can connect to this story, then it makes sense. But giving kids information that's out of nowhere and giving clients information that's out of nowhere is like, okay, how do I bolt me here with these stories onto this story that's nowhere near? And really, if you want to build a bridge, those stories need to massively overlap each other. And that works best if you just, what's the best next thing that you can be doing?
Yeah, and that segues really nicely into a question that I scribbled down earlier around self-experimentation. So you talked about when you moved to Denmark and went on a bit of a journey of self-discovery and what play meant for you. So what's your kind of coaching methodology or view for adults wanting to kind of develop more in terms of their health, because I guess that's what we're talking about, but in any area of their life really, around finding their own path and self-experimenting?
Well, do you know, there's a upside and a downside to being an expert in some of the physical stuff, right? Because being an expert, it lends me to going, actually, I feel like I know the answer to that question, whereas it might not be the next thing for that person. It may not make sense to them. But as far as my own experimentation goes, if I say I want to increase my capacity to be mentally present by doing something that ticks the boxes of meditation. And so what I'm saying is I want to have this parasympathetic nervous system dominance and focus that I can carry on into the rest of my life and improve everything based on the research around meditation. But rather than saying I want to meditate and just beating myself up in some way around that meditation, I start exploring and going, which one makes sense for me? So I experimented with lots of different types of meditation. I've experimented with lots of different types of parasympathetic breathing, and I've experimented with things that I do when I'm out going for a walk or yoga. But it's going, this is the thing that I want more of. Now, rather than saying, I'm going to try meditation, and then if it doesn't stick, beating myself up, I just go, what is everything in this category that moves me in this sort of direction, and being willing to experiment with all of those different things, and experimenting with different morning routines that makes me feel good, and actually experimenting more with what can I remove rather than what can I add in to my day, so that I don't go, well, I wake up and I do these 64 things, because how do I make it better if I'm not adding in more? And finding processes that create the largest amount of benefit for me, and then being willing to just throw them away while I find something else that's of more benefit to me. But as it goes for my clients, I ask them where they are in large detail in every aspect of their life, but then I show them where they are physically. So we go through a test of neuroscience kind of based tests. I do eye testing, I do inner ear testing, I do breathing testing. I do mobility and stability testing. I do lymphatic testing. I do gut testing, but not in, you've got a red on this blood test that we took for you, which means this, but rather things that they can test for themselves. So like the lymphatic testing, I get them to really push hard on those lymphatic, on top of those large glands, and then go, okay, so can you see that how inflamed your body is because that hurts? And would you like to try something that removes that and improves that? And then these are the things that you'll notice. And then did you notice those things? So that their brain can go, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll commit to that experiment. And yeah, I've noticed those gains. But I try and do as many kind of different physical tests where they can go, oh, I can't reach the floor there, and I did say I'd like to be more mobile, and then adding in those things that will get them there most quickly, so that most of my clients will end up with something that looks like a 20-minute routine in the morning, and then a few non-time stealing activities that they'll do throughout the day. But the non-time aspect is kind of an important thing. It's like, if I do this thing, I get a significantly better night's sleep. And there's one that I got from Dr. Perry White from Stop Chasing Pain, worth a follow, everyone.
I've had him on.
Awesome. So he had a little bit of tape. He put a little bit of tape behind the ear that communicates with the vagus nerve and makes you feel safer. And I've had my clients try that, and those that have tried it, especially those who've got like sleep apps, are like, okay, so my phone says I'm getting 30 minutes deeper sleep and I feel more well rested. And it's like, this takes no time.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes no time and it gives you deeper sleep. And I'm not going, you need to get to sleep earlier. They're just getting a deeper sleep. And I help people use a number of those different things that can go, this small action creates this big result.
I think that is for me, that is absolutely the way to develop really and grow. And that's the only way we develop and grow, is by learning on our own and finding our own path. The challenge I see is people, markets, whatever it is, the media, we want to buy into an off-the-shelf solution that's step by step, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And if I do those 10 steps, I'll get this amazing result. And it's a real dichotomy to me as to kind of what you see going on out there and what sort of marketing messages kind of work versus actually what intrinsically works and what we see works with children and developmental processes.
Yeah, I mean, I try and have a very principle-centric marketing message that kind of says, hey, have you tried X, Y, and Z and found that it hasn't worked? Have you tried to create an exercise habit? Have you tried to be a more value-driven person? Have you tried to consistently get yourself to sleep? Have you tried to drink more water? Have you tried New Year's resolutions and goal setting and all of those things and found that they aren't working for you? And are you still getting derailed by your feelings, or overwhelmed by going home, or finding it impossible to not put your phone down? And willpower isn't the story, and it isn't to do with you. It's to do with your approach, and the approach that's universally sold. And I just kind of write down those 10 guiding neuroscience principles that we know to be true, that, you know, willpower lives in the prefrontal cortex. And when you're trying to make a habit out of something and your brain is fighting against it, you're in your temporal lobe. You've got your brain's pumping out emotions and going, you clearly don't want to be doing this. We don't want to be doing this. You don't even have access to your willpower. And so I keep telling that message and stay away from you're going to drop X in Y time. Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? I think it is it's a real minefield out there, and it's certainly in the fitness space. It does feel like there's certain things that work that in terms of people will attract people because they're making that connection, on that sort of cerebral connection, that emotional connection rather. But actually what we're saying here is what works in terms of longevity and health is people understanding that they need to create their own path and their own journey and their own unique approach. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, within the realm of there are certain things that work and there are certain things that don't work, but that's been a really important lesson for me, is don't attempt to package up anything that you're not consistently doing in your own life. And whether that is if you're doing a coaching program and you're not taking yourself through your own coaching program, then firstly, you're missing out on getting a ton better at taking other people through it. But what you're saying is, I'm done, I'm fixed, I'm great to those people, and you need help. But as soon as you're just a person on the same journey, taking other people through it, you start seeing those things where this is where I can improve it. This is where I can make it better. And I'm not asking anyone to do anything that I don't believe is possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love the way that you put that together. Cool. I'm just conscious of time. I'm going to ask you the question that I ask all my guests, and that is, what does health mean to you?
That's an excellent question. I think health means that you're able to stay in the present and you're not being pulled out of the present. And to elaborate on that further, I think that habits that we know literally kill us are us medicating being pulled out of the present and us going, this moment is too uncomfortable, so I need to medicate that. And stress is essentially us worrying about the past, depression, or worrying about the future, anxiety. And so to bridge, and then pain, again, that's our brain saying, hey, pay attention, do something about that. And I think the more we can stay present, the healthier we are, whether that's physically paying attention and doing things that serve us and make us feel even better and help us be even more present, then that's the physical side, and the mental side is the same.
Really concise answer. I think it's probably the most concise answer we've had, but yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't think there's a simpler way to put a kind of my view as well, actually, and that is, yeah, it's about having the focus, isn't it, on what's going on right here and right now, and making those choices based on that, as opposed to kind of everything that's just in the world around us, and the you know, this constructed chaos that we live in. But
absolutely. No. I mean, the reason monkeys exercise and the humans that don't, it's because what will these people think if I don't get this done? Or what will these people think if I change this? Or what will these people think if I do that? It's fear of the future every time that causes that inaction, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're not thinking about the future, if we're mentally present, it's just a demonstration of health, I think.
Yeah. Cool. And do you, what are some tools and tricks, tactics to stay present?
Well, as you know, there are huge benefits to meditation practice, and also huge benefits to movement awareness. And we've seen that in all of the kind of the trauma research and the stress, depression kind of area, is that the physical thing is awareness around your behaviors. So practicing eating mindfully, cooking mindfully, making mindful choices, meditation, awareness over your movement, rather than I'm going to see how hard I can work and how much I can suffer, but how much I can concentrate. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger always used to say, I imagine myself in the muscle. That was Austrian. If you missed that. So mindfulness of our activities, that's kind of like the body part of it. But then the other part of it is getting clarity around who we are and why we do the things that we do, and our emotions and the recipes that create them, not just the negative ones, but the positive ones, and getting clarity around what we know already and what we don't know, and what we're skilled at and what we want to be skilled at. And it's just slowly getting clarity around all of our words and those things that most impact us, stop us being pulled out of the moment, which is why the definition was so easy for me as well.
Yeah, I think, yes, that does make sense. And people, in my experience, largely speaking, are just not spending the time to do that. They're not finding what I call the pause in their life to actually take stock and do those things and raise their self-awareness and get that level of understanding. It's just we live in this distraction economy, and it's just one thing after another.
Well, look, the way our brain works is the basal ganglion just runs and it produces our habits. And until we go, I'm going to create the perfect scenario for my basal ganglia to pay attention by doing something new, telling somebody that I'm doing this new thing, and putting some caveats around it, like I'm going to try this for this amount of time, and unless these situations arise, kind of giving ourselves this real clarity around this thing, and I'm going to be experimenting with this new way of acting or not acting, so that our basal ganglia pays attention. And if it goes, yeah, that's better, then it's a new habit. But if we never give it a new action and make a new commitment to another person and create an idea around this new way of thinking, speaking, or acting, then our basal ganglia won't ever accept this new habit unless we just move into this new environment where we go and join a new group who places exercise as the most valuable thing to them, or places smoking to the most valuable thing to them, or how many pints you can drink in an evening and walk home value to them. And that's the thing that impacts us most, right? When we change environments, and unless we deliberately decide what we're going to do and what's going to benefit us, we end up just following the tribe. Yeah. And then we look at, once we go, I feel safe with these people now that I have the same behavior, we look at winning. Now I want to move up the hierarchy, so I'm going to be a better CrossFitter, or I'm going to be a better smoker, or I'm going to be a better drinker, or I'm going to work longer hours, or whatever criteria this new group lauds as the highest value.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and that rings true with my background. I had a conversation. I do some coaching for GPs in near I am now, down towards Brighton way, and they were asking me. I've got a military background, and that's where I cut my teeth in the fitness trade, was in the military. And they were, you must have done a lot of coaching in the military, and there is zero coaching that goes on there.
Yeah.
for the reasons you said. I was getting young guys ready for airborne selection, and it was 100% instructional, because they are seeking the status that I had and that they wanted to attain. Their intrinsic motivation was 100% walking through the front door. Like there's no coaching required unless they got injured, and that was a slightly different story, because then you have to sort of build them back up. But largely speaking, that group of young guys there were ready to go. And there isn't any coaching that goes on, because it's that, like you say, it's that tribe mentality. It really is, and it can work well for you up until a point, but then at some point, I think. We see this with the military. Until you don't belong, or you don't want to belong within that tribe, then things start to unravel very, very quickly. If you don't have that intrinsic motivation, and you've not done the deep work that you've talked about so eloquently.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine that being the perfect environment to, well, you either adopt these behaviors or it's not going to work for you. You're out, right?
Exactly right.
I'm not going to coach you into wanting it.
Exactly right. It's funny because it carries a certain status even now, and I'm always a little bit surprised around that. Obviously, the discipline and the structure and all that sort of stuff, leadership, but from the softer side of things, it just. There isn't a synergy in my eyes, but not from my experience. But yeah, Ed, I am done. We're kind of out of time as well. I know you've got some really exciting news for us, and you've got something coming up next month, February 2020. If you're listening to this as it comes out, please tell us what you're up to.
Yeah, so I've got a TED Talk in February. My first kind of TED Talk in Denmark it's been such a bizarre kind of whirlwind experience of only really engaging with the country 2 years ago to finding myself doing a TED talk in a couple of months' time. Next month, but we've still got the rest of this month. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. I'm really looking forward to it. It's Tedx, and I can't actually say the next bit. It's Fredericksburg, right? But it's Fredericksburg or something like that. Fredericksburg. That may have been it.
As in Hamlet's Castle.
I think Hamlet's Castle is Holbeck.
Holbeck, okay. Fredericksburg, is that the officer training? Is it up that way? Anyway, just trying to dig up my knowledge of Denmark. But and what will you be sharing at that? Can you dive into that?
Yeah. So what I'm going to be talking about, without giving away too much information, is I'm talking about my process of going from being told at a really young age that these were my flaws, and then discovering that these were my talents, and then kind of going all in on those talents and things that I'd noticed that I was good at and better than anybody else at really early on. And it's not anything kind of majestic, right? It's just like I noticed that I was really good at moving my body, and I was really good at practicing relentlessly more than anybody else. And I could do those two things. But I was also given a handicap at like 4 years old, where I was really constantly reassured that I was shy. And it was a kind of a there, don't worry, you're just shy. But the way our brain works is we adopt that as this is me, this is part of who I am. And also that I was average or slightly below average capability in the brain stuff. And ultimately that was based on some teachers' feedback who couldn't use their exact system to get me to produce the stuff that they wanted to, that basically is handed to us at school. It goes, you're a C grade person or just below. And I've got loads of school reports and stuff that are like, you are just below average, and if only you'd apply yourself more, and you just need to focus more, and what I'm talking about is this journey of discovery of my own weaknesses that I was handed as a kid, and then discovering when I got to start helping the A grade people that were in the highest paid jobs around, that actually they discovered that they lacked exactly the same thing. And so if they lacked exactly the same thing to get themselves to do the movie stuff and the ET stuff they needed to do, then perhaps neither of us, we either both had the same problem, but they got an A. So if they're the best people, then why is it maybe neither of us has a willpower problem? And so I'm going on that personal journey and then unpacking that a little bit.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I look forward to that. And where can people connect with you that are listening to the podcast?
LinkedIn is probably the best place. Mm-hmm. Just Ed Ley, EDLEY. I'm on the other social medias, but I'm not particularly active, but I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and responsive.
Wicked. Well, thanks again, Ed. It's been awesome. I loved your insight. I really do. And the thought that you've put into the coaching practices that you deliver and all the bits and pieces that you've spoken about. It's enlightening. And, I've been scribbling away some notes down here as well. So just from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I know my audience is going to absolutely love it. And I'll look forward to hearing the feedback on this episode. Thank you very much, Ed.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Guys, another episode in the bag. Hopefully you enjoyed that one. If you are enjoying the show, which I certainly hope you are, please leave us some feedback, rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really does help us reach more people, which is kind of what I'm about and what this program about, what the podcast is about, and my kind of mission in life. So please kind of help support if you are finding value from this podcast, and share it with someone you care about if you think they'll get some value for it. That's probably the greatest thing you can do if you want to support us. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and Ed is a great guy, and we carried on chatting for a good 20 minutes after the episode and talking about all sorts of things, including education, which obviously is prevalent to my mind, having just had a baby. But I really enjoyed that chat, and it's really kind of got me thinking, certainly at the start of this year, about how I look forward and how things kind of fall into place for me. So I really appreciate him jumping on and chatting to us, and maybe we're getting back on and we'll go a bit deeper dive in some of the things that he's up to. Guys, thank you very much. I will catch you on the next episode. Take